Let's talk some NFL, people. Back at it here with the Too Deep podcast, proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire KC metro area. Full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. The full schedule for you here tonight on things to get to. Obviously, the ramifications of what's going on with the Buffalo Bills continues to be a big subject as the Bills and Bengals game actually get played. As we put this together, as you catch us on the podcast later, there may have been answers that have come together, but here Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central when we stream live, nothing yet. How will the game being played, the Bills playing against the Pats, impact this playoff race? Should Jalen Hurts be playing against the Giants if he's not 100%? Where's Derek Carr end up next? Who wins? Detroit, Green Bay, winning in. Same thing with Tennessee and Jacksonville. We'll break those games down. Who gets the 7th seed in the AFC? Is Jim Harbaugh back? Should he want to be back? Where should he be back in the NFL? How many coaches are fired this week? And what are we all looking for here this week in the NFL, Week 18? It's all coming up next here on the 2D Podcast.
This is the Too Deep NFL Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Too Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Too Deep Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And welcome here to the 2D Podcast. As you heard, Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network, Eric Eager, Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We are glad to have you. Certainly still difficult times looming over the NFL with everything that's happened, but maybe some good news medically. We'll see. I don't think we're out of the woodwork whenever someone's still in intensive care, but the NFL does start to turn the page, look ahead to what's going to happen this weekend with the games that are going to be played. And Jeff, how about it? Where do you sit right now as to whether or not we're going to actually see this Bengals-Bills game get played at some point?
You know, I'm still a believer that they will push to make it happen. A lot depends on what happens in Week 18, but now you're hearing some rumblings about the possibility of the Bills not playing this weekend against the Patriots, which could throw another wrench into this whole operation. You know, I've heard a ton of scenarios over the last 24 to 48 hours, and I keep hearing more today. I was talking to people back at my office about what possibly could happen. I think there's a little more momentum towards the possibility of it not being played, of there being a tiebreaker involving winning percentage, which will give the Chiefs obviously an advantage if they won this week. You know, there's talk about this being a tie. There's talk about it being pushed, as we said yesterday on our podcast, to a Week 19 scenario. I just think, end of the day, it makes the most sense to play it if you can make it happen. They have a window to make that happen. I don't think anybody who would end up having to wait for that game to be played would be upset about having a bye, a chance to rest. Anybody in the playoffs would be watching them play for a week, so that would give them an opportunity. But again, I also understand, you know, Damar Hamlin's health is paramount here, and that's driving a lot of what's happening with Buffalo. And if they're in a place where their players are going to say, we can't play again this week against New England, which is a real possibility, I don't know what you do now.
Is there a chance that they would say to Buffalo, listen, are you guys calling off your season? Right? Like, and I don't mean that to wave that as a, you know, a stick over somebody, but it's like, okay, We understand you weren't ready to play that night. And I think a lot of people say, okay, we understand if you're not ready to play because he's still basically in intensive care and hanging on and in a coma. I've heard a lot of speculation, people talking to friends that are doctors about the different things that are coming out that they're hearing. That's not good. This is good. All these different things. Like at some point, like I said, life will move on. Everybody in other walks of life have gone back to work. At some point, the NFL will have to move forward. Is there a chance that the Buffalo Bills are asked, listen, do you feel like your season can't continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big, this is an issue, right? We had this issue with COVID where, and I'm not trying to, dismiss any of what Damar Hamlin's going through, but, this is a situation where there's a collective, kind of understanding where we're going to, reasonably try to solve the problem, reasonably try to work with the humanity of the players. And yet, at some point, the show must go on. I don't know when that right answer is, obviously. I think that's where, the league is probably going to be a little bit more on the side of, hey, these guys got to play more quickly than maybe we would be. But with the season ending and the Super Bowl coming up, I do think that they're probably going to, work with Buffalo for 1 week as they have this week. And then after that, they're kind of on their own.
Yeah, I think, listen, I'm with Jeff. I still think you got to play this game, right? You put the schedule out there, it's got to be played. And I do think, and again, not to be, like insensitive to what's going on, but I do think that there is, a point where you got to say, listen, guys, I mean, are you going to play? We respect any decision you make, but we've got to put together a playoff bracket and the league has got to move forward. I mean, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. I think that is something that societies across the world face all the time in situations on what's going on. I mean, the night that the war in Ukraine happened, I think everybody was ready to send donations and everybody, what do we do? And we're going to send troops. The war continues. And I don't know about anybody else. I did a 4-hour sports talk show, which is inconsequential compared to somebody who's, shuttered up their house and is fighting for their life and their country, over people that are invading. But the rest of the world moved on. You decide it is or isn't your fight. And when it comes to war and everybody else, gets going. And again, this is different. And I get it. And it's not to be insensitive. And I understand. And I think it's completely understandable if the Buffalo Bills say we can't play football this year. But I think at some point, that's where the commissioner has to step in and somebody's got to say, look, for the greater good of everything that's going on, a decision needs to be made. Jeff, we haven't heard from the commissioner.
No.
Right? Do you think at some point it's going to be on him to come on NFL Network, talk to you, make a statement, start answering some questions? I mean, I get being sensitive and waiting and wanting everything to unfold, but this is something, comas can last a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
So at some point the league's got to get back to business. And I would think at some point the commissioner is probably going to step forward and make some statements for the league and make some decisions for the league, isn't he?
Yeah, he's going to have to do that. And I think the timetable for that to happen really is by Friday, because a lot of teams playing this week need to know what's at stake going into the weekend, right? I mean, especially the Patriots, the Ravens, a lot of teams that are fighting for playoff spots and also care about Damar Hamlin, by the way. I keep saying this, two things can happen at the same time. You can care about what's happening with him and want the best for him and also be talking about how do you move forward as a league. And so, I do think by the end of the week that will happen, but I think they're going to do everything possible to make sure they're being as sensitive as they can be and as fair as they can be to everybody involved in this conversation. And again, that's why I go back to me, and I've heard people say the hardest thing to do is to play the game, but to me, you have a system set up where you can actually do that. You've done this before. You did this in 9/11. You didn't used to always have a 2-week period between the championship game and the Super Bowl. And so this can be done. And it's just a matter if they want to do it. And so it feels to me like they're waiting to see more of what would happen in week 18. But at some point, you have to have a very difficult conversation with the Bills and probably the Bengals too, because they're involved in this about what they want to do, what's important to them. And if the Bills say, you know what, we don't feel like playing right now, but we'll go in the playoffs where we're at, wherever you seat us, then that's fine too. I don't think this really isn't a question of, hey, will the Chiefs benefit now and get that top seed and have the bye, or are the Bills and Bengals still in play for it? I just think that everybody involved recognizes that this is a human tragedy. This is a very difficult thing. Nobody wants to see this young man lose his life. But the other side of it is that you're going to play a football game at some point. And if it's not for the Bills, if it's not this week, it's got to be next week. At some point, you just can't keep saying, well, we just can't do it. And if you can't do it, then you got to bow out. That's part of this too.
Yeah, I agree. I think some point, listen, I'm with you, Jeff. I think Friday should be the point that some decisions have to be made. But if it's not Friday, it's certainly Monday morning or Sunday night, really. I mean, they start putting out all those playoff schedules. Yeah. When those come out, like that's when it's got to be. So sometime, immediately following, decision made sometime during the day, Sunday, probably Saturday at the very latest. And then here's the schedule, because nobody's going to sit around practicing for no opponent and not knowing, like the whole thing's got to be put together at that point. How does playing versus the Pats impact the Bills, Eric? What this spread opened at 10.5. It's now just 6.5. What's the impact of playing against the Patriots this week on the Bills if they play?
Well, yeah, if they play. I mean, the Patriots stink. I don't know. Belichick certainly is not a guy that's going to take it easy on the Bills because of this. But the Patriots don't do anything well, particularly. I think they're okay coached at this point. But, there's got to be a little bit, as far as a letdown on the minds of the folks who are betting this game for Buffalo or on New England. New England is playing for a playoff spot, albeit, again, I don't think anybody expects them to win this game. But, yeah, I think bettors are just, and they're probably the least maybe this is least socially aware people, but they're just trying to grab value right now, right? And there's value on Buffalo. Maybe there are players for the Bills who don't play, and maybe there are some players that do play, and so maybe they're buying into the fragility there with Buffalo's roster possibly not being full. Yeah, there's a situation where the game goes on, but maybe there are some players who are closer to DeMar Hamlin than others that don't play. And so I think that bettors are buying into the possibility that even if the Bills do play, it's not going to be all their players. That would be my gauge on the situation. But yeah, it's interesting. And there's also a part of it, Soren, just from a betting standpoint, that if a game changes days, it automatically voids the bet. So I think people are just grabbing value on New England now. In the case where, there is a Buffalo at full strength, there's a chance that game's a different day and their bet voids. And so I think that's all the reasons you're seeing the number move towards New England.
I go to work after, not a lot, but a handful of times in my life. I can think of traumatic events or things that were really important or were gut wrenching to me. I don't think I was at my best. If nothing else, I mean, forget if anybody sits or doesn't sit, Jeff, this is going to be a tremendous distraction for a team to try to go out there. Now, I also think it could be, and I heard Mark Boerichter, former Chiefs wide receiver, say this, it could be the therapy that a lot of guys need. Go do something that they take their mind off something, and maybe you get, hey, let's win one for DeMar attitude. I mean, what do you think the impact will be in playing this game against the Patriots?
I think it's more of an inspiration than a distraction for the very reason Richter mentioned. I do think, just looking at situations that I've covered and followed over the course of my career, I think when it's really close, when it's really raw, like somebody mentioned the Chiefs playing after the Javon Belcher incident, I think that's when it's hard to really be focused because your emotions are really raw. You're just kind of in a fog. You're trying to get through it. In that game, that wasn't a very good Chiefs team, and so I think they got beat that day, if I remember correctly. It was not a great time for them to be able to get their heads around playing a football game.
That was one of the Chiefs' only 2 wins that whole year, actually.
Oh, did they win?
Really?
Yeah, they played Carolina and they won. That was the only start Brady Quinn ever won for the Chiefs.
Okay. It was a bad team then, right?
Brady
Quinn was playing. It was a bad team.
If you said Brady Quinn started and won a game for the Chiefs, I would have lost it. I would have taken the hell no all day.
That's what I was thinking.
No, I just remember that because that was the year that the Chiefs never had a lead for the first like 10 weeks of the season. And I think that they actually led that game for most of the game. And it was strange. Like that was one again where, the Chiefs used it as inspiration for or that was the narrative at the time, because I think the only other explanation was they're insane for having played the next day. But yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I referenced, earlier today on radio talking about the Detroit Lions in 1991 with Mike Utley being paralyzed. Certainly 9/11 comes to mind, and having been living in New York City when that happened and taking a week off from football and coming back and seeing football being played. It was like week 2 or week 3 of the season. So it was very early in the process, but it meant a lot to some of the teams that played. I know the Patriots won the Super Bowl that year, and they had a couple players, or one player whose brother was a fireman working in New York City. I think more than likely, and again, pray to God this guy doesn't die, doesn't lose his life, and it seems like he's getting better. But yeah, I think that can be a huge motivation, a huge emotional lift, knowing that this is somebody who's one of your brothers, somebody that you've sweated with and toiled with for a long time, and that he's in trouble. Yeah, I mean that's like storybook, 101 when it comes to playing sports. That you have something like that emotionally can lift you up in ways that you might not otherwise be able to do.
Let's turn our attention to the NFC side of things. Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts playing against the Giants. Maybe not 100%, but you also don't necessarily want a guy being rusty. What's the balancing act, Jeff, for playing Jalen Hurts in this game against the Giants? Eagles are big favorites. Says to me, we'll get Eric's thoughts on this on the betting market, says Jalen Hurts is going to play. How much? What do you expect in this one?
Well, I would expect him to be out there, and it depends on what the Giants put out there. The Giants have nothing to play for in this game. And so if I'm Nick Sirianni, if Jalen Hurts is not 100%, I'm not going out there and running quarterback sneaks or design runs. I'm trying to figure out how can we get a lead, how can we coast and get Gardner Minshew into the game. And so, yeah, I think there's some gamesmanship going on here. But ultimately, the Giants, having been destroyed by the Eagles a few weeks back, not on the same level, you would expect them the Eagles to be able to come out and dominate this game or take control of it early. And so I don't have a problem with him playing, but I would have a problem with him being exposed to injury he doesn't need to be exposed to. You can win this game with him throwing passes, not running, and not taking big shots. And so that would be my approach to it if I'm Nick Sirianni.
Eric, how do you approach it?
Yeah, they're 2 touchdown favorites in this one that I think is a combination of also – the Giants are basically locked into playing the Vikings in round 1 of the playoffs, a team that they took basically to the buzzer the other day. So I think they're content with, especially how banged up they've been. I think they're content playing their backups for a significant part of that game. And I agree with Jeff. I think the biggest issue last week was the Eagles thought that they could go in with a vanilla game plan on offense and defense and their backup quarterback and win against a bad Saints team, and they weren't able to. And so they're probably going to be on their best behavior this week schematically, which is probably going to lead to probably a creative passing game for Hurts. But to Jeff's point, not a ton of running for him. And so I see the Eagles taking care of business. They probably even get Hurts out of that game quickly. The last time the Giants and the Eagles played, the Eagles crushed them. And again, like I said, the Giants have really nothing to play for here. So I do think, that this is going to be a laugher for the Eagles, and hopefully for them, they can get Hurts out of there in the first 2 quarters or so.
If there's any question about his health, he doesn't play. You can win this game without him, with Gardner Minshew for one. But if he is somewhat healthy, I do think you want to knock the rust off. I listen. I think we've seen guys who don't play in the preseason go try to start the NFL season up, and they look like crap. Aaron Rodgers after not playing any preseason. So, I mean, I do think you want to get the guy. Andy Reid's a big believer. He always has Patrick Mahomes out there in preseason games that if you want to be good at football, you got to play football. And I think Jalen Hurts could use knocking the rust off, but I think you'd rather him knock the rust off in the first quarter of a game healthy than get knocked out if he's already unhealthy. Our podcast here, the 2D podcast, brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, probably serving the entire KC metro area. The Gain Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. You can find them online at GainAsphalt.com. Tell them you heard about them on the 2D podcast. Call 816-484-3338. Gain Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Let's talk about Derek Carr. It looks like it's done for Derek Carr, Jeff. Where should he be next year? Who should want Derek Carr? Where should Derek Carr want to play?
Well, New York Jets should be calling. The Commanders should be calling. Saints should be calling. I keep going down. Carolina Panthers should be calling. I mean, there's a lot of teams out there that there's plenty of teams out there, a handful that have been in the discussion for a playoff spot who are out of discussion right now because their quarterback play is pretty bad. And Eric will appreciate this because I talked to a friend of mine in the league, personnel guy, and we were talking about what does Derek Carr do? And he said, look, if you look at the sample size of Derek Carr after 9 years and Matthew Stafford after 9 years, Derek Carr has outplayed Matthew Stafford. His touchdown interception ratio is better. He's got more yards, and he's won more games. And so you look at what's happened to Matthew Stafford's career over the last 5 years and what he ended up with a championship ring. Derek Carr is a top 12 to 14 quarterback in this league, depending on what year you're going. Probably even better right now. I mean, he can play football at a high enough level that he should be starting somewhere. And so if I know he has a no trade clause in his contract, I know he's a West Coast guy, but I think he's playing on a really good team next year and has a chance to go deep into the playoffs if he plays this right.
Eric, we can talk about Washington. They seem to have a different quarterback every year. You can talk about Indianapolis, same story there. You can find all of them, Carolina and whoever ends up coaching that team, anybody that doesn't have the quarterback. But let me run a couple of ones by, and Jeff, I'll get your thoughts on this as well. Here are teams that people aren't going to say that I think need to consider it. Not they need to do it, but they need to consider it. San Francisco 49ers. Everybody's got the Jets too. That's a team that looks like it's got all the pieces, but just needs a quarterback. But what about the San Francisco 49ers and the Baltimore Ravens? And I'm going to bring it up twofold. One, do you really want to lock yourself into a $200+ million contract that Lamar Jackson seems to want largely guaranteed? And at some point you think you're going to hold out. If you could trade Lamar Jackson for a lot of picks and get Derek Carr for 35 cents on the dollar, are you better off in Baltimore doing that? Is San Francisco convinced of Trey Lance, Brock Purdy? Tom Brady's name has been thrown around in San Francisco. I know every team that sucks, they're all going to be in, right? We can do that. And the Jets are the team that I think looks like that's the one piece they're missing. Good defense, lots of personnel. Jeff, you've talked about that. But Eric, what about the 49ers and Ravens? Like when we hatched this as a topic, that's the one thing I was like, well, who could be coming from off the radar screen to do it? Those are two good football teams that I think you can make a case for. This move could make sense for them.
Yeah, the 49ers have less than $1 million in effective cap space next year with 34 players under contract. So while I think you're on to something, like, let me take a step back. At the end of last season, Derek Carr was everybody's favorite mid-tier quarterback, right? And you had Dan Orlovsky say, like, hey, here are the guys you can win because of in the NFL. And he listed all the names that matter, and then Derek Carr. And I went out and I said, look, I think everybody's overrating Derek Carr right now. Let's bet the Raiders under. And I got a lot of crap from Raiders fans. But the fact of the matter is like, you look at what has happened in Vegas and Oakland since he's been there. They drafted Khalil Mack the same draft as him. Then it was Amari Cooper. And then it was a bunch of crap. And Derek Carr could not overcome that crap. And we live in Kansas City. Mahomes has overcome a lot of crap. Josh Allen can overcome a lot of crap. I'll even concede Justin Herbert can overcome a lot of crap. Like, the question that I like, whenever I see folks mock a guy like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy Garoppolo, any of those guys to a bad team who pops up for 1 year, I always think, okay, what if he goes to the Jets and the Jets defense, what if Sauce Gardner regresses, right? Because we know that's the nature of cornerback play, right? What if CJ Mosley gets hurt again? What if Quinnen Williams is a 8 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10 like he's been this year? can Derek Carr overcome that? And the answer is no. Like the problem with these teams that are a mid-tier quarterback away is we always look at that from the perspective of the current year we're in, and they're always brought in to win Derek Carr is going to be brought in to get the 2022 Jets into the playoffs. The problem is the 2023 Jets are the team that he needs to get in the playoffs, and they're not going to have the same setup.
Yeah, listen, everybody.
So to your point, a good team like the Rams getting Stafford, a good team like the Niners getting Carr, that is the right place for Carr to go, unless he's just trying to make the money. There are that. I agree with you, because if he goes to one of these bad teams that is just a quarterback away from competence, it's going to fail.
Well, I think there's only one bad team that's just a quarterback away from competence, and that's the Jets. I mean, they showed that they can be competitive with anybody out there. I think anybody else is just a bad team, right? The Panthers are a bad team that their coach got some fire lit under their ass and they got going. I think there's only one team that I would call a bad team that's a quarterback away, and it's the Jets. And I don't want to
take New England, though. What about New England?
Fine. Yeah. I would put them. Not as much, though, because I don't think their quarterback play has been trashed. Mac Jones had moments. I think coaching is their issue. The asinine, all my kids are on the staff, and rocket scientist, defensive coordinator is going to coordinate the offense. Bill Belichick is losing his touch.
Pig one, number one, actually. I think Pig one, number one has an interesting thought here. What about Tampa Bay? The problem with Tampa Bay is $55 million over the cap effectively. Wow. And I know Brady contributes some of that, but it is a really, and again, I'm always jaded by, what the Vikings did with Cousins, where you're in the NFC Championship game with a guy like Keenum, and you're like, if we only had a guy I was at the combine with, talking to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah about, the Browns, because he had just come from there. He's like, if Kirk Cousins was our quarterback this year, we make the playoffs. And I'm like, yeah, but you have to fix everything else that gets you to that conclusion. And so I guess the question is where could Carr go? Where I think you have to look at places that are actually down and out that could improve. If you could have seen a year ago that the Jets defense was going to be a wagon, then Carr is winning a Super Bowl with the Jets, right? But so the question is, I actually think Carolina, for example, is a team that Carr could go to and they could have success. That team has talent. And you bring in a Jim Harbaugh, you bring in a Derek Carr, and I do think they could have success.
I love that. Eric's rewriting the whole narrative here.
I want to come back to the Jets, though. I mean, you ran from that quite quickly, Eric. And I'm bringing this up about Tommy. He said Robert Saleh came out today and said he's behind Zach Wilson playing for the Jets in 23. Yeah. So, that. And by the way, and Tommy's a guy who calls my radio show all the time. It is the first guy to throw anything a coach says right out the window. But then when it fits a narrative, we're gonna count it as the letter of the law. Coaches will say he's got to coach one more game with the guy. Zach Wilson may be cut faster than coaches are fired on Monday. It is bad with him. He is not the plan in New York. I will bet any amount of money Zach Wilson is not the first week starter unless two other quarterbacks have gone down in preseason football for the Jets next year. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that happens. No way. I want to, the whole narrative so what should the Jets do? Stay with Zach Wilson, Eric? I don't even get what your plan is. I mean, Derek Carr is clearly an upgrade over the Jets, Jeff.
I'm just saying have modest expectations. If you bring in Derek Carr and the season win total is 8.5, I'm betting under.
The question is where he should go, right? Let's just get him somewhere. Then we'll figure out the expectations.
But my issue is for a quarter, my issue is
your issue is he's not great, so you don't even want to talk about him. That's what it sounds like to me.
I just don't want Jets fans to get all up in their feels in the offseason when they get Derek Carr and everybody's like, this is Super Bowl, homeboy. And I'm like, no, you're finishing fourth in the AFC East.
Point taken. Jeff, what do you think about Carr to the Jets? And then I want your thoughts also on good teams like the Niners, the Ravens, changing their course and going. Would he be a guy that with better coaching could be a lot better than he was this year in Las Vegas?
Look, I think the Jets were a good team until their quarterback situation got out of hand. I mean, they were a team that was trending towards being a playoff team. And, I pushed back on Eric. I think Sauce Gardner's going to be all right. I think Quentin Williams is going to be all right. They've got some people there who are pretty good players who are not going to stop being good players because the numbers might say that they won't be as great next year. I hear what you're saying. They might have the kind of years they had this year. But I still think if they had Derek Carr this year, they'd probably be an 11-win team.
But I don't dispute that at all.
7 ifs together don't go 7 for 7.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm with Jeff. The Jets are better put together than thinking like, oh, if the best defensive tackle in football falls apart and the best corner in football, fine, they're 4th, they're 5th. Like, they're not going to fall off a cliff. I don't think the rest of the surrounding talent for the Jets falls off a cliff. Right? It'll fall off a cliff if they don't have a quarterback, because some people get tired of getting their, blowing games at the end all the time. And that's what this team has watched. That's why if you get a competent quarterback that can make some plays, to me, Derek Carr can play the role of Alex Smith with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I don't think anybody's thinking, oh, you've got the guy who's going to go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But, Alex Smith beat Tom Brady in an opener on his field. Alex Smith won games, won a division championship. I mean, there's
Alex
a role.
Smith and Andy Reid. Like, I would agree that if you put Derek Carr on the
that's what I'm saying. Are you going to eliminate the quarterback position because you don't have Andy Reid, Eric? Like, you seem like you're like, oh, they can't win.
I'm just saying the Jets are screwed, Soren. I'm just saying the Jets are screwed. Like,
but why?
I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your team built a wagon of a team without a quarterback, and to entice a guy like Carr, you're going to have to extract from that team, and then you're screwed. I'm sorry.
What are you going to have to give up for Derek Carr? What do you think the price
$40
for
million
Derek Carr
cap
is gonna be?
space and a 3rd round pick, 2nd round pick?
It's fine. First of all, I don't think it's going to be
not fine. Bro, the Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes make 40 to 45 million a year. If you have Derek Carr making 35 to 40 million a year,
he's not going to make that.
Yeah, he's not making that.
You don't do the deal if that's the cost. Listen, he is a guy who has not pissed a drop in the postseason. Jeff, tell me.
I don't care. He signs these contracts.
Have you been drinking tonight?
No.
This is like drunk Eric.
Yeah.
No. Like, you have folks who are talking about Daniel Jones making 30 to 40 million APY. A quarterback who is a starter in this league that gets a veteran deal is making that kind of money, and you lose every time when that happens.
Let's get Jeff's thoughts on this, because you're preaching to the choir on that. I've said that forever, that it's, I'd rather have Fitzpatrick. I've said this for a decade. I'd rather have Fitzpatrick at $5 million than Alex Smith at $18 million. So you're preaching to the choir on that. But Fitzpatrick made $5 million. Jeff, there are guys that don't get 35, 50 million. Everyone who starts doesn't automatically get a $50 million deal.
Yeah, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay that. And I think Derek Carr is at a place where he can understand. What's he got? 2 years left on his deal right now. He signed this deal, 3-year deal. Back in the summer, back when McDaniel showed up. Is that what it was? 3 years, like 120 million or something.
Here are Derek Carr's cap hits over the next few years. Again, you can get out of this pretty easily. So maybe they rip it up and write a new deal. But his cap hit this year was 19 million. His cap hit next year is 35 million. The cap hit the following year is 44 million, and the cap hit the following year after that is 43 million.
Let me end this part and let Jeff talk, because I will bet $35 million is his cap hit. I will bet you that he counts no more than $20 million on anyone's cap next year. Dinner, you already owe me 2. Let's make it 3. Do you want that side of the bet? You want to? He will not count $20 million on anyone's cap next year.
20 million.
That's right.
Okay.
You want that bet?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. There it is. Done deal.
But the bigger point, whenever we have conversations about quarterbacks, it's always funny to me, because once you get beyond, Mahomes and Allen and Burrow, the stars, you can even put Rodgers and Brady in there. It's like people act like there's all these other options out there when there aren't. There's only so many guys who've won games, who've been productive. And I give Carr even more of more credit, because he played with a crap dysfunctional organization for 9 years. So if you put a guy like that in a good organization, as what happened with Matthew Stafford when he went to the Rams, they become better players, and they help you become a better team. And so, I do think not just the Jets, but the Commanders The Niners, not so much. I think that they're happy with what they have there, and I think they believe in Trey Lance and what he can become, and they've got a system that doesn't really require them to go out there and make these kinds of moves. And Tom Brady is a factor, as somebody mentioned here, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers didn't go anywhere, and
He can't.
and Garoppolo is a factor. Those guys will be free agents, and so they're going to have opportunities to really decide. But after that, I guarantee you, Derek Carr is going to be a very hot commodity.
The flaw in what Eric doesn't realize the wager he made is I said that he won't count $20 million against the cap. He can sign for 160. I guarantee it'll be backloaded and he'll count about $7, $8, $9 million against somebody's cap next year. There's a snowball's chance in hell he counts $20 million against the cap. Now, if you were thinking APY, average per year, well, that's shame on you. We've got a recording of the bet that he won't count $20 million on someone's cap next year. And I guarantee he won't. It's not going to happen. There's no chance.
I'm just deciding what I want to eat.
Maybe I'll just scratch off one that you owe me. We'll call that party. If it's better if we're buying the meals. So figure out where you want to go. But listen, where should he want to play? I think it's the Jets. I think that's a good situation there. I think that's where you ought to, try to go. Usually I'd never recommend anybody go try to resurrect a career in New York, but I think that situation looks pretty tasty to me if I'm a quarterback. Who wins? Tigers. Lions plus 4.5 at Green Bay, winning in. Jeff, come on. There's no chance you're taking the Lions on this, are you?
You're right. You're exactly right about that. I told you 2 weeks ago that the Panthers game was exactly the kind of game the Lions will lose. And as much as I like what Dan Campbell has done, this game has Packers, probably blowout, written all over it. I mean, it just feels like they've been waiting for this opportunity. Aaron Rodgers is going to be the smuggest SOB in America come Sunday night. And, I know last week it felt as if their defense just got, had a fluke game against Miami where Tua was throwing some bad balls and they caught them. They beat the crap out of the Minnesota Vikings. And they shut down a guy who I think is one of the top 3 players in football, Justin Jefferson, and said they were going to do it going in. And so if that defense is finally playing the way it was supposed to play, and Aaron Rodgers is trusting his receivers and they're running the football well, and it's Lambeau and the weather's going to suck. Yeah, I think the Packers are going to win and they're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah. Eric, you want to wave that lion flag one more time?
Well, as the guy now, look, Jeff came along with me at the beginning of the year. Said that Lions would make the playoffs along with me.
Can we love this from Leslie? Yeah, this feels 100% like the Packers set a nuke off against Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Look,
Crafty
I think
line.
that,
That's all. I'm just paying homage to the line. It's crafty line.
So let me get some numbers out here. Last week, the Minnesota Vikings, who the betting markets had pegged at best an equal team to the Detroit Lions. When the Detroit Lions played the Vikings in Ford Field, they were favored, and the Vikings have only gotten worse since then. And the Lions have only gotten, the Carolina game sucks, but the Lions have basically, won and covered every single week since they started 1-6, with the exception of one. And they lost to the Bills. So they've lost 2 games. They've covered all but one. The markets have the Packers somehow 4.5-point favorites in this game, and they were only 3.5-point favorites to the Vikings last week. The Vikings, newsflash, and I, from there, whatever, love, friends with Kwesi, all that stuff. The Vikes suck. Okay, that team, they've gotten they're a 12-4 team with a negative 19-point differential. When they face a team with a pulse, they get their asses kicked. So
Buffalo,
they were down 17 in that game. They got lucky. Josh Allen was throwing the other team.
They got lucky.
Listen, I agree.
Yeah.
With you. The point differential is probably a truer indication of who they are than the record.
Kirk Cousins is 21st in the NFL in QBR this year. The defense is 31st in points allowed. Now Detroit's 32nd. But all this stuff.
It's
important to remember that.
Because we don't have the Vikings.
This is to say.
Wait a minute, because I'll let you get back to the Lions, but because we don't have the Vikings on the board as something we're going to get to today, I do want to say this. This game absolutely smells like a Vikings drive with 1:10 to go to kick a field goal, with 7 seconds to win by 1, and Kirk Cousins to come up the tunnel and yell, "You like this," and all his teammates to jump up and down, and all the network guys, the Jeff Chadihas, the NFL, Jeff won't do it, but the NFL network people to get all excited about Kirk Cousins, then for the nuke to get dropped on the Vikings the following week. But it does, that does.
But what I'm saying
with you
is
on the Vikes, but they're not going to play anybody good in the first round anyway.
But the what I'm saying is the fact that Detroit is 4.5-point dogs in this game, and the Vikings were only 3.5-point dogs last week, is assuming, in my opinion, something that is not true, which is that the Rams are going to lose to the Seahawks, and it's going to cause the Lions not to care about that game because they're eliminated already. And I think that the Rams have a decent chance of beating the Seahawks, and B, I think Detroit will play Green Bay hard regardless of whether or not the game puts them in the playoffs. As Jeff, if they go 9-8 this year, the roar has been restored, right? They go 9-8.
Oh, I agree with that. But they blew it.
So I think they're going to play hard. I think the markets are just underrating them because they don't believe that the Lions are actually going to have a chance to make the playoffs because the Seahawks are 6.5-point favorites earlier in the day. So I'm taking the Lions to cover the spread. I think they even, they're a 10% chance to make the playoffs if you put all the money lines and stuff like that together. I'm going to bet over on that. I think the roar is going to be restored. I think we're going to see Detroit go to San Francisco, and that is when we're going to see the nuke, is the first round of the playoffs with the Niners bludgeon the Lions. I think the Lions win this week. I think they make the playoffs, and all our bets hit.
This is the same answer when the Panthers were up like 20 points on the Lions 2 weeks ago, was saying, "Hey, wait for it, Jeff. It's coming. It's coming."
They cut it. They cut it a few times. Look, I was also the guy when the Lions were
rushing. 300 yards
I was
rushing
also
in a game
the guy
to take control of playoff destiny.
Chadiha, I was also the guy when the Lions were 1-6 who said, "Hey, it's coming."
I am with Well Done Chiefs fan here because what are you drinking right there at Mom's house?
I'm tired. I am tired.
I've
had a great day and I'm having fun.
We have seen well lubricated Eric on one of our podcasts.
I'm not.
This isn't that. I mean,
I drank enough in Kansas City this weekend. I'm more than I'm sober as a judge right now. I'm just having fun.
I do find the 4.5 a little bit puzzling. I think this.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying.
I find it puzzling just because I think it should be 3.5, or it should be Green Bay minus 5.5, 6. Like I get not being at 7, and I get not being under 3, but 4.5 is complete no man's land. I don't understand that. This to me should be hitting a little bit, more up towards that 7 number. So I'm struggling with what that number is, and I'm struggling with how to read it. To be honest with you, Tennessee plus 6, Jeff, at Jacksonville. That seems like, from recent history, a big number for the Jags to be laying, but the Titans are a team that is just in a free fall, and the Jags are a team that seems to be, finally growing up. I mean, is this a contest?
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be when you're talking about starting a quarterback in Tennessee that wasn't even there 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's like that's where you start with them. I mean, think about how scary this could be, though. This goes back to our initial discussion about the Bills-Bengals game and playing. If the Patriots, Steelers, and Dolphins and Jaguars all lose, we could have 2 AFC South teams in the playoffs at 8 and 9. I mean, that's one reason alone to play that Bills-Bengals game and try to bring some order to this, start eliminating teams like this. But the Jags should roll. I mean, they've got the better quarterback. They've got the better offense. They got a healthier team. The defense is taking the ball away now. All these questions about their youth and some of these guys that weren't getting done earlier. We saw them in Kansas City a few weeks ago, and even though they lost that game, they were a feisty team. And I just don't. I think just Tennessee is just a far cry from what they've been the last couple of years under Mike Vrabel. And to me, it shouldn't even be a game. I think that betting line is too low, to be honest with you.
Okay. Eric, how do you see this one?
Yeah, last week I actually kind of liked Houston against the spread, just because Houston had given Kansas City a game, it had given the Dallas Cowboys a game, and had beaten Tennessee outright, which is one of the reasons we're here right now. And yet Jacksonville, who didn't have anything to play for, kicked the hell out of the Texans, right? And that was from beginning to end. I would, this sounds ludicrous, but I would put the Texans and the Titans in similar standing power rating wise, especially if you have Josh Dobbs playing. The only reason I think that this number is less than a touchdown is a few reasons. A, you have shorter rest for Jacksonville playing on a Saturday coming off a Sunday. You have longer rest for the Titans coming off of a Thursday to a Sunday, Thursday to Saturday. So there is a little bit of a rest differential there. You do, I think, have equally good coaches in Vrabel and Peterson. You have the toe injury to Lawrence, who's missed practice time this week as well. Those are the only things to me that keep it from being a blowout. But as somebody who has a ton of money on Jags to win the division, preseason, all that kind of stuff, I'm not hedging any of my bets. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I like this. Is Vrabel still a genius? I think he might be if he wins this one, right? Like I think that'll be.
This team has no one.
They're cooked.
Who's the safety? Byard's playing. He's good. Henry's fine. Henry had over 100 yards in the first half the last time these two teams played. And that game, the Titans were leading at halftime. Tannehill was the quarterback then, and the Jags came out in the second half and beat them by multiple scores. But that is the one thing is and this is why I don't understand why Malik Willis is not playing, because I think your only chance in this game if you're Tennessee is to do the read option stuff and hope that you can, get the linebackers in conflict.
Times, yeah.
That's it. That's what they did against the Chiefs too, right? It was limited, but that's essentially how they got the Chiefs into a quandary at Arrowhead on that Sunday night game.
The six. Listen, I like math, but I don't study. I like trends, but I like hearing about them, but I'm not going to go look for them and study them or anything like that. When I look at this spread, Jacksonville should be like a 9.5 point favorite. They're only 6, and that scares me to go to the window and bet Jacksonville. It says to me that somebody knows something, or I'm wrong. This is just they think we're getting down to nut cutting time, and so the general public is going to move the lines more than it does during the rest of the year. I don't know. Both those spreads on the
familiarity in the betting market's worth about a point. So division rivals, that's contributing to it. You have the rest differential, which is worth another 0.5 point. I think those are things, Petro, that is keeping this thing from cross. And then 7, right? If you cross 7, that's a big percentage. So that's why they're shying. I do think it probably closes a little bit higher than that. But right now, they're basically, the number is the number, but those are the things that are contributing to it being a little lower.
You got to like that. If Vrabel's bringing the bucket of chicken, I don't know. Bring a bucket of chicken to a game, you're looking good. I always like when somebody shows up at my house with a bucket of chicken. Who gets the 7 seed, Jeff, in the AFC? How does this finish up?
Man, it's a lot of flawed teams in that spot right now. If Tua was playing,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
they are the epitome of commercial filler for the postseason. It really doesn't matter. But just
whoever you see it too,
having some
really
fun.
I'd go with the Dolphins. Even with Tua not playing, I think they're the best team in that bunch. I don't see the Bills losing to the Patriots unless they don't play it, unless something crazy happens injury-wise. They're just not on the same level as the Bills are. And even with the distraction, like what they have going, I think that they're good enough to just roll through the Patriots. And the Steelers they need too much help. They need the Dolphins and the Patriots to lose. And so Jets are playing the Dolphins. I don't see the Jets. I don't know. Maybe they get fired up and want to do something at the end of the road, but I think by the time you get to that point, they've had a lot of things happen in their season. I feel like they're not going to be as inspired. And Dolphins get in. Ugly game, but they get the win and get the spot.
We had somebody point out, and I don't think I got it up on the screen there, but how about the Dolphins for Derek Carr, which when you've got Tua in 3rd concussion, and they keep saying 2nd, 3rd. The educated people know it's the 3rd this year. Then that's a legit point. Eric, who do you think gets number 7?
I think it's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's favorite against the Cleveland Browns. Jesus, Petro.
We had a list. We had one again. If you catch us on the podcast, you can be part of the part of the conversation. We stream live Wednesdays at 9 p.m. And, C. Nell Sooner said, I cannot tell for sure, but is Eric's hair thinning? I don't know.
Look, I take pills
Some
for
bad
that,
lighting.
Petro.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
your hair always seems to end up being a topic on this thing. I put it up there and it threw you. Come on now.
Yeah.
Focus.
I need to get it cut, but I'm in Minnesota and I have not been able to drive for a couple of
They
days.
don't have barbers in Minnesota? Is that the deal?
It's been snowing, Pat. You didn't let me finish.
Okay.
It's snowing, so I can't, I don't feel safe or comfortable driving.
As we have watched, Jeff, have we not watched Eric from like every room in his parents' house? We know one thing. They don't have trim paint. There's none of the trim in that house that has been painted. We're going old school wood, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Is that a mirror behind you over your right shoulder, by the way? What is that? It's like
I think so. This is actually my sister's old bedroom, but anyway. So Pittsburgh, and here's why. The Dolphins are starting Skylar Thompson, and I know hashtag EMAW, everything like that. They're not. The Jets are going to win that game. I'm also going to cash my under 8.5 Miami Dolphin win total ticket. The New England Patriots are losing to Buffalo. I'm going to cash my New England under 8.5 win total ticket. You can see, Petra, my bets are coaching my analysis here.
Yeah, right.
The Browns are 2.5 point, 3 point underdogs against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's favored to win that game. I think they do pull it out. I think, we're not quite ready for Deshaun Watson to be considered a favorite in a game against a decent team. And I think even though Pittsburgh is not a great team, I do think that they're better than Cleveland. So it's going to be Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Okay, there it is. The Steelers. I'd love to see Mike Tomlin back in the playoffs. I think it'd be great. The 2D podcast brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, a one contractor, all things parking lot. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. No commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Free consultations as well. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Check them out online at GannAsphalt.com. Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL. Jeff, is this something that should happen? Where should he land?
He will be in Michigan next year, and he will pull this same stunt at this time in 2024. This is vintage Jim Harbaugh. Bruce Feldman is a friend of mine, worked for The Athletic, worked for Fox Sports. He's very close to Harbaugh. Last year at this time of year, Bruce Feldman broke the story saying Harbaugh will go listen to NFL offers if they show up, and somehow he finagled an interview with the Minnesota Vikings, the only team that came running for him. And now that, it's going to be a done deal if the NFL comes looking for him. And sure enough, Denver Broncos are doing their homework. Carolina Panthers, David Tepper's, their owners had some kind of conversation with him, not an interview, but a conversation. He wants to be paid more money. Took a big pay cut a couple of years ago. He knows a couple coaches in that conference are getting paid more than he's getting paid. He's had 2 great seasons. He wants more money. This is what Jim Harbaugh does. He is not going to be coaching an NFL team next year. I would be shocked to see that happening.
Eric, should somebody be going for Jim Harbaugh? Is there a team that needs Jim Harbaugh?
I think Carolina could do a lot. What characteristics of a team, were such that Harbaugh had success, right? San Francisco, you had a great defense. You had a quarterback that, was a failed first-round pick that, needed some nurturing. In Carolina, you kind of have that with Darnold. You kind of have that with Brian Burns, J.C. Horn. Some good defenders there. That, to me, makes sense. You also, much like the NFC West back in 2011, you also have a crappy division. The NFC South, Bucs are going to be terrible once Brady leaves. Saints are terrible. And the Falcons are not very good. So I do think that's enticing if you're Harbaugh. So that would be one place that I think could attract him. I know you, Petro, have always wanted him to come to Kansas City. That's a few years away though. Because
I put that up there. Somebody had that up there. I like this. Harbaugh would fail in the NFL, in my opinion. I mean, he did take a team to the Super Bowl. I
took a team to 3 straight NFC championship games. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I agree. I do think. And here's somebody said he's 44-19. Brad says
his quarterbacks were Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. You did fine.
That's the thing is I think there's going to be enough jobs, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Enough jobs open that there's going to be competition, and there's not going to be candidates that you go, okay, that we'll win a hire with this. You win the hire. You sell tickets when you get Jim Harbaugh. Back-to-back playoffs for Jim Harbaugh and his NFL record to tout. And I think he wants the NFL. I think that's where he wants to be. I think he took Michigan because he wanted out of San Francisco and he didn't have the opportunity. I did at one point, and I based that on the fact that, I believe Jim Harbaugh would love to coach the Kansas City Chiefs because he told me in an interview I did when he won the NFC Coach of the Year award his first year in San Francisco, and I asked him point blank, hey, are the rumors true that you had taken the Kansas job and it got screwed up by the athletic director who said you couldn't coach the bowl game with Stanford? And he basically said, yeah. I mean, he said, I can't be two places at once. And I promised my seniors, I promised, Andrew Luck, I'd be there. And he said, I would love to be, at KU. I'd be right down the road from my wife's in-laws. And so that's what I base it on. There was a different regime at that point. I don't think that that's the guy that's going to, I think when Brett Veach hires somebody, if Andy Reid were to step away and Brett Veach were still there, I think it's going to be somebody in the Andy Reid tree. I think Matt Nagy will be the next coach if you ask me now.
It's the wrong system. Jim Harbaugh wants what Pete Carroll has. He wants what Andy Reid has, and that would mean Brett Veach would have to go.
Right.
I don't know if you want Jim Harbaugh to have absolute power in any NFL organization. I think but he's not the guy you want with that.
I think he will.
You have that in Carolina. Fitterer was a choice of Matt Rule, and I don't mean this in a derogative sense, but I just mean it in reality, like a weaker GM.
Yeah, I think in Indianapolis he can write his own ticket. I think he can write his own ticket in Carolina.
Maybe they done Ballard. Did they get rid of Ballard?
I think he'll be given
Ballard's hot seat right now.
I think he'll be given the power over Ballard. But I don't. Ballard to be there probably for a year, and then Jim Harbaugh would run him out, or Jim Harbaugh wears people out. There's no doubt about that. But he wins games, and I think the one thing if you're Jim Harbaugh, the only job you don't want is Denver or Vegas if it would open up. You want no part of playing Herbert and Mahomes 4 times. Right? Anybody who takes that Denver, here's a prediction I'll make. Nobody with any clout, nobody with any track record, nobody with any bargaining position, right, takes the Bronco job. And I think that could be where Eric Bieniemy lands, not because of the Colorado ties, because they look around and go, well, how can we inspire this fan base? And they go after Harbaugh. And he's like, I'm not going into that mess. And they go after everybody that's got it. And what you may end up getting is a guy who's like, wasn't on anyone else's radar screen. It's like, well, this is the only offer I got. Or it's a guy who's been around for a long time and has never been given a head coaching shot, who gets his one shot and says, well, I got to get my head coach stripes.
Dave Culley.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That kind of hire.
Yeah, exactly. And a job exactly like that. Why? Does anybody think a headline name is coming to Denver?
No. I mean, I do think the Bieniemy Colorado connection actually does make some sense. But to your point, like I do think it has to be somebody with some warts and somebody who maybe isn't desperate for a head coaching job, but is kind of like, hey, this is the best I'm going to get type of thing.
I think Andy won't let his assistants go in division for a head coaching job. Let's see.
Andy traded Donovan McNabb to the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. And I think if they decide that they want to reshuffle the coaching staff and they like to keep Matt Nagy, they got to get him up to OC, an assistant head coach. There could be. Listen, if the Chiefs were to lose in the first round of the playoffs, I think Dave Tobe might be gone. I think Eric Bieniemy might be gone, whether he gets a job or not. And Andy Reid says, okay, I've been doing a lot to get everybody jobs. It's time to restructure this. Like, I can't keep spinning my wheels here. So,
there is a real, people forget this, but like Ron Rivera was like the hot head coaching candidate for multiple years and he never got the job. And eventually Chicago fired him. Right. And like eventually, and then he did get a job in Carolina, was decent head coach and all that stuff. But like, there's a point at which like the Chiefs and Bieniemy are going to break up. So
I don't know. How do we mock Donovan's? What was his take that we mocked? I don't think we mocked anybody. Harbaugh would fail in the NFL. Okay. Yeah. 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 You can remember it. I'm mocking that. I don't think he'll fail. in the NFL. You can go with that. All right, Jeff. How many coaches get fired this week?
Going forward?
Yeah.
Okay, so Rule
Because
being
we're down 2, right? Denver and Carolina already.
Yeah.
How many
Hackett. I think Lovey goes.
Okay.
I think Kingsbury goes. It's just a dumpster fire there now, and it's just, even though they paid him, it's just I think it's just a mess. And even though they're running an offense that's designed for that quarterback that he knows very well, they got to find somebody in there who can coach that guy and make him a better player and bring some stability there. Beyond that, I'm trying to think. I was racking my brains. I don't think there's anybody else who really. Maybe Dennis Allen. Maybe Dennis Allen in New Orleans.
Let me give you the odds that are out there for the next coach to be fired, right? Mm-hmm. And then this is so it doesn't mean that they'll be fired or not. It's just the next one. Yeah. The shortest odds: Cliff Kingsbury, Kevin Stefanski, Todd Bowles, Nathaniel Hackett. Well, Hackett's gone. Lovie Smith, Dennis Allen, Matt Eberflus. That was the board before Hackett got fired.
Yeah. I have one that I don't. That's not on that list. Ron Rivera.
Oh, always. I did see some other odds. Rivera's on the board. You can bet Rivera.
So here's
but what's Snyder doing now? He's got so many other things going on. He's got time to fire a coach.
But this
get
is
one more firing in before he goes. You know?
Guys, this is a pattern though. In 2020, Rivera's first year with Washington, they started, I believe, 1-7 or 1-6. They got to 6-6. Then they faded, and they needed the Eagles to lay down for them to win the division at 7-9 in Week 18. Last year, they started out, I believe, 2-5, 2-4, got to 6-6, finished 7-10. This year, start out 1-4, get to 7-5, and have lost or tied every game since. Every single year with Rivera and Washington is the same. Start out crappy, trend well in the middle, and fail like heck at the end of the season. Like I do think, and it's all been like same kind of quarterback thing, like Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Wentz and Heineke. I think that they are going to grow tired of this same exact thing every single year.
Yeah. I think Kingsbury's out. I think Lovey's out. I think the Texans they didn't get who they wanted, and they made a hire that would keep people off their back. And now they're going to be like, well, we're picking first. We can fire anybody we want. Todd Bowles in Tampa is intriguing. They say, okay, we're starting fresh with a whole new program. I don't think so.
I think he's got a lot of cover with Arians there being in the front office.
I think Tampa beats Dallas in the first round of the playoffs, and then what do you
Yeah, you're not going to fire him at that point.
Yeah.
How about Matt Eberflus? Would they really walk on him?
They're
never
trying to lose.
Yeah.
They're trying to lose.
Jeff?
No, I agree. I think they went into that knowing this was going to be a rebuild, and it's all about what they do with all that salary cap space. And Justin Fields has turned a corner. I don't see where he's in danger. I think they're and they recognize that. To Eric's point, the Vikings maybe not be as strong as their record shows, and the Packers, once Aaron Rodgers is done, they're pretty vulnerable. And so, yeah, they may be thinking, look what the Lions did in 2 years. We could be there in a hurry with all that money.
Imagine Jeff at the beginning of the year, the team looking at the Lions with aspirational jealousy.
They've done a great job.
They have. They've done amazingly. I'm just rubbing it into everybody that doubted us.
I'm surprised that Stefanski is on that list as high as he is, because I think they knew going into the season that this was going to just be, let's get through the Deshaun mess and get to the other side to 2023, and then let's start trying to win games again.
Can somebody help me out with what corner Justin Fields turned?
You don't think he's turned a corner? Did you see him play last year?
I think he's turned the corner in the sense that they said we can't win throwing the football, so we're going to run the hell out of him, and he'll be beaten to hell and going nowhere. Just like I think, frankly, is going to happen with all the other running quarterbacks. Like where Lamar Jackson's watching for the second straight year, Kyler Murray's hurt. Like if you think the idea is piling up 1,000 yards rushing on your quarterback, you're a jackass. If That's
John
your
Harbaugh
plan.
was on the
Plan
John Harbaugh was on
sucks.
the verge of being fired 5 years ago, and then Lamar Jackson showed up. He started playing Lamar Jackson, and he's still
I
rolling.
think the plan is, I'll state again, if the Bears' plan is to run Fields into the ground and try to be the changeup, although you're less of a changeup now with more and more teams doing it, and then when it comes time to pay him, eject, fine. That's what I've always said the plan should be in Baltimore, and that's what they should be doing, trading him and finding the best quarterback that can throw the football better to replace him and get as much as you can, build up his trade value, take something back for him, and move on until you can find the guy that can really spin it, because 2-minute drives are not run by a quarterback's running all the way down the field. It doesn't win.
But that's
that
not
way.
on Eberflus, though. That's what he inherited when he got the job.
Yeah,
right?
but I'm just saying. I just brought his name up. Like, could that be a surprise one?
Oh,
Because I don't think anybody, if you've got a young quarterback, should be hiring a defensive coach. Because if you OC does any good, he's gone to being a head coach anyway. So what are you doing? You're just spinning your tires. I don't like. To me, it's not seeing what's the next domino that's going to fall. You're making a mistake to begin with that. What are you looking for this week, 18, Jeff? What's the one thing you're looking to catch?
Bills, what they do, do they play? How do they play? It's been a long week for them, and it's I don't know what to expect. I think that they'll be inspired, but I think it's we haven't seen them since they walked off the field in Cincinnati. So I'm curious, what they look like when they come back on the field.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm with Jeff. I think that's on top of all of our minds. I think secondary to that, the year of the cat, the Jaguars and the Lions. I want to see what they do this weekend in big games.
Is that the Chinese New Year of the cat? Is that where we're at? I'm not sure where we are this year. I'll go a little different. I'm going to go Jets Dolphins because I think the Dolphins, talk about, penthouse to outhouse in 1 year, like the way they started. And I know injuries at the quarterback position have been a part of it, but talking about a guy who was like the talk of the town to where that's a place, like we mentioned Jim Harbaugh. Who's his buddy?
Yeah.
Who's his buddy? His buddy's Ross, the owner of the Dolphins.
That's why they're going to keep him in Michigan.
Yeah,
hey, what are the odds of Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan, two buddies, going through 6 quarterbacks in one NFL season?
Based on their track records, probably pretty good. I mean, the limited track record we've got.
They always got to hurt quarterbacks.
I think the Dolphins are an intriguing story this weekend. I think they need to win. Otherwise, you got a lot of question marks after what was a really, really impressive start. They didn't go get Tyreek Hill to talk about the future. They went and got Tyreek Hill to win now. And so I think that's a big one for the Dolphins. All right, that's going to do it for us. Remember our sponsor. We always appreciate Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. If you got any questions, issues, problems with a parking lot, call them, GannAsphalt.com online or the phone number 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about it on the 2 Deep podcast. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager, Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you very much for joining us here on the